I never thought I'd watch my father's retirement ceremony through a screen. But there I was, sitting in my apartment overlooking the San Diego Bay, laptop glowing in front of me. The man I hadn't spoken to in 8 years standing tall in full uniform. Admiral Thomas Hale. My father. The legend who never lost a battle, except the one with his own daughter. The applause from the crowd echoed faintly through my speakers. I adjusted the volume, more out of habit than interest, wrapping my hand around a mug of coffee that had already gone cold. The medals on his chest caught the light, perfect, polished, untouchable. Just like him. I'd built a life far from his world. My mornings didn't start with roll calls or commands. They began with code reviews, defense contracts, and the quiet hum of innovation. I had my own battles, just not the kind he respected. When the camera panned across the audience, I recognized faces I'd grown up seeing in military banquets. Commanders. Officers. Even his old Navy aide, now a decorated captain. But not me. I wasn't invited. My phone buzzed suddenly, a restricted number flashing across the screen. I frowned, hesitating before answering. Miss Hale, a crisp voice said, "This is Commander Brooks from Naval Intelligence. I suggest you come to the base immediately. There's something you need to see." My heart stilled. For a moment, I just stared at my father's frozen image on the live stream. The salute, the pride, the wall between us. And then I whispered, almost to myself, "Guess the Navy isn't done with me yet." Voice softens, reflective, like old film memories fading in. When people hear Admiral Hale's daughter, they imagine discipline, honor, and straight-A perfection. What they don't see is the 16-year-old girl standing in a storm, yelling through the rain that she just wanted to breathe. Growing up in the Hale household felt like living on a naval base disguised as a home. Every morning started with a checklist: bed corners sharp, posture straight, no room for hesitation. "Excellence isn't optional," he'd say, adjusting my shoulders like a soldier preparing for inspection. But I wasn't built for his kind of war. I loved engines, computers, building things from scratch, not marching in line or saluting walls of authority. When I got accepted into the MIT robotics program, I thought he'd finally be proud. Instead, he just stared at the letter and said, "MIT builds soldiers of the mind, Madison. But the Navy builds leaders." That was the start of the unraveling. The night I told him I wasn't enlisting was the last night I lived under his roof. He stood in his study, medals gleaming behind him like silent witnesses, while I tried to explain that I wanted to create, not destroy. He didn't raise his voice. That almost made it worse. He just looked at me with the same disappointment he reserved for officers who failed inspection. "If you walk out that door, Madison," he said quietly, "you walk away from the Hale name." I remember my throat burning, tears I refused to let him see. On his desk lay the small challenge coin he'd given me when I was 10, engraved with the words "honor in all things." I picked it up, held it in my palm for one last second, then set it down beside his medals. "I'll make my own honor," I told him. The rain outside was relentless that night, fitting, somehow. I walked out with a single suitcase and the echo of my father's silence trailing behind me. Years later, I'd learned how that silence can shape you, make you sharp, determined, unstoppable. But back then, it just felt like losing the only family I had. Faint music swells, a mix of sorrow and quiet strength. That was the night I stopped being his daughter and started becoming myself. Starting over was the hardest part. When I left home, I had $2,000, a scholarship, and a heart that still expected my father to call. He never did. At MIT, I threw myself into work. Circuits, AI, defense systems, anything that let me prove I could build something powerful without a uniform or a rank. There were nights I slept under my workstation, mornings when my coffee tasted like metal shavings, and weeks when my reflection looked like a ghost's. But every rejection, every dismissive comment, "Sweetheart, this isn't a field for girls," lit something in me. I learned to fight quietly, through results. After graduation, I joined a private defense research firm in D.C. I didn't mention my last name on my resume. Madison Hale became Maddie Carter, the name on my apartment mailbox, The name on my first paycheck, the name I used to disappear. For years, I worked behind the scenes developing drone safety systems, designing algorithms that predicted battlefield patterns before soldiers even stepped foot on them. It wasn't glamorous, but it saved lives. And that was enough. Until one night, an email landed in my inbox. Your work prevented the loss of 47 soldiers today. You don't know their names, but they'll never forget yours. It was signed by Commander Evelyn Rhodes, a retired Navy intelligence officer who had transitioned into cybersecurity. She became my mentor, tough, sharp, and honest in ways that reminded me of my father, but with compassion he never learned to show. Evelyn taught me how to navigate politics, patents, contracts. Don't just build things, she said once, sipping her black coffee. Build something worth saluting. Those words became my compass. Within 5 years, I had founded Helios Defense Systems, a company dedicated to creating non-lethal defense tech that saved soldiers instead of sacrificing them. We started in a cramped warehouse with 4 engineers and a coffee maker that hissed more than it brewed. By year 3, we were supplying to 3 branches of the U.S. military. Every milestone, every signed contract, I thought about calling my father. But I didn't. He wouldn't have recognized the voice on the other end. I kept my success quiet, no press interviews, no public appearances. When old family friends reached out on LinkedIn, I smiled, typed polite replies, and never mentioned who I really was. The Hale name had built a Navy legacy. Mine was built in silence, fire-tested, wire-bound, and powered by sleepless nights. Short pause. Her tone softens. When I saw the news headline, Admiral Thomas Hale to retire after 40 years of service, I stared at the screen for a long time. The article listed his accomplishments, his awards, the ceremony's date. No mention of me, of course. I closed the laptop, leaned back, and let out a slow breath. Some things never change. Or so I thought until that phone call came. Music fades, replaced by a slow, rising heartbeat sound. Transition back to the present. The naval base looked exactly as I remembered, cold marble floors, echoing footsteps, that faint metallic scent of discipline and order. As I walked through the security gate, the guards saluted instinctively before realizing they didn't recognize me. Old habits, I thought, almost smiling. Commander Brooks met me at the entrance of the ceremonial hall. His uniform was crisp, medals gleaming. "Miss Hale," he said with a small nod. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I wasn't invited," I replied. He hesitated, then quietly added, "Some things have a way of correcting themselves." The hall was vast, flags draped from ceiling to floor, rows of decorated officers sitting in perfect symmetry. The front stage shimmered with navy blue and gold. And there he was, my father. Admiral Thomas Hale stood at the podium, posture straight as ever, voice steady. His hair was silver now, but his presence still carried that same quiet authority that could silence a room. I slipped into the back row, unnoticed. His speech began like 1,000 others I'd heard as a child: honor, service, sacrifice. But when he reached the part about regrets, his tone wavered. He cleared his throat. "A career like mine demands choices. Not all of them easy. Some you carry forever." My pulse quickened. Did he mean me? Before I could decide, the Master of Ceremonies approached the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we conclude, we have one final presentation, a special commendation from Naval Intelligence." I frowned. This wasn't on the program. The MC continued, "In partnership with Helios Defense Systems, this new initiative has saved countless lives and revolutionized field safety for our SEAL teams. The Navy would like to formally honor the lead architect of the Helios project, Dr. Madison Hale." A hush fell over the hall. My name echoed through the speakers like thunder. My father froze mid-step. His eyes lifted slowly, searching the crowd until they found me. Our gazes locked, the Admiral and the daughter he'd cast out. Soft inhale in the voiceover, emotion tight in her throat. I rose, the sound of my heels on the polished floor filling the silence. Every step felt heavier than the last. When I reached the stage, I turned toward the sea of uniforms, 1,000 eyes, 1,000 breaths held. The MC stepped aside. Then something incredible happened. One SEAL in the front row stood up and saluted. Then another. And another. Within seconds, the entire formation, nearly 300 Navy SEALs, rose to their feet, saluting in perfect unison. Their voices rang out together, deep and commanding. "Salute, Admiral, the daughter who carried your legacy forward." My chest tightened. My vision blurred. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. Even my father stood frozen, eyes glistening, mouth slightly open, as the weight of it all crashed down. I returned the salute, steady and proud. Then I spoke, voice steady, but trembling underneath. I didn't come here for recognition. I came because I wanted to prove that honor doesn't come from a title, it comes from what you do when no one salutes you. The crowd erupted into applause, loud, rising, unstoppable. But my eyes never left my father's. When the applause finally faded, he stepped forward, slow, deliberate. For the first time in years, he smiled, faint and uncertain. Then he raised his hand and saluted me. In that moment, every scar between us stopped aching. Music swells, a blend of pride, grief, and redemption. That day, the Navy gave me an award. But my father gave me something I'd been waiting for my entire life: respect. After the ceremony, they led us to a quiet room behind the main hall, the kind reserved for admirals, dignitaries, and moments too fragile for public eyes. The door clicked shut, leaving only the two of us. For the first time in 8 years, I was alone with my father. He looked smaller somehow, without the stage lights, without the sea of uniforms standing behind him. Just a man in an old Navy jacket, staring at the daughter he'd lost to pride.
He was the first to speak.
"I didn't know," he said softly. His voice cracked, the same voice that once made cadets stand straighter. "I didn't know it was you behind Helios." I crossed my arms, partly to steady myself. "You didn't ask." He nodded once, the kind of gesture that said more than words. The silence between us stretched, heavy with years of regret. Then he took a breath. "When you walked out, I thought I was protecting you from failure. I told myself discipline mattered more than dreams." He paused, eyes damp. "I was wrong, Madison. I'd imagined this apology 100 different ways, grand speeches, tearful reunions. But standing there, hearing those quiet words from a man who'd never learned how to bend, I realized something. I didn't need him to say more. I just needed to set my own terms." I reached into my purse and pulled out the old challenge coin, the same one I'd left on his desk years ago. Only now, it gleamed with a fresh engraving. I placed it in his hand. "You taught me honor in all things," I said softly. "I added something new." He turned the coin over and read the new words aloud, his voice trembling. "Honor and forgiveness in all things." His eyes lifted to mine, and for the first time, they didn't look through me. They saw me. I took a breath and spoke the words I'd rehearsed in my mind 1,000 times. "If we start again, it has to be different. No orders. No silence. Just respect. You don't have to agree with my choices. You just have to see that they have value." He nodded slowly, fingers curling around the coin. "You have my respect," he whispered. "And my pride." I smiled faintly.
"Good.
Then maybe we'll both finally earn our peace." Soft music swells, gentle, emotional closure. In that moment, the balance shifted. He was still the admiral, but for the first time, he saluted me as an equal. And for the first time, I saluted back, not as a soldier, but as his daughter. It's been 3 months since that ceremony. Sometimes, I still replay the moment. 300 SEALs rising to salute, my father's trembling hand, the weight of a lifetime lifting from both our shoulders. We meet for coffee now, every Sunday morning at a small cafe by the harbor. No uniforms, no medals, just two people trying to understand each other over black coffee and blueberry muffins. He listens when I talk about my projects now, even asks questions. I tease him when he doesn't understand the tech jargon, and he teases me back for drinking oat milk. It's awkward sometimes, healing usually is. But it's real. He's different too. The man who once spoke in orders now pauses before giving advice. He even volunteers at veteran support programs, says it's time to serve without salutes. I think he finally understands that leadership doesn't always come from command. Sometimes it comes from compassion. As for me, Helios Defense Systems keeps growing. We've launched new humanitarian programs that use our tech to protect rescue teams and medics in disaster zones. Every innovation feels like a promise kept to him, to myself, to the version of me that once walked away in the rain. Last week, I received a package. No note, no return address, just a small wooden box. Inside was his Navy insignia pin and a note written in his tight, neat handwriting. For the Admiral of the next generation. I smiled, tears catching in the corner of my eyes. It wasn't an apology anymore. It was a handover, a recognition that legacy doesn't have to look the same to carry the same strength. Music swells softly, strings and piano blending in harmony. That night, I placed the challenge coin on my desk, next to my laptop, next to a half-finished schematic of a new safety prototype. The coin gleamed under the desk light, both old and new. Honor and forgiveness in all things. I traced the engraving with my thumb and whispered a silent thank you. Not for the Navy, not for the medals, but for the journey that turned a fracture into a foundation. Her voice softens into a final, reflective tone. My father taught me how to salute authority, but life taught me how to earn it.